Stealth Mode Media is a freight adjacent Twitter agency, and it's designed to help companies modernize the information that they get out to carriers, brokers, truck drivers, but with the mindset of just building a community around your content. And the premise around it really is that the decision makers in the freight world are changing, but they're changing at a 10 to 15 year lag compared to a lot of other tech businesses that we've seen, because it's not a tech business. It's very much an older generation business. That said, as those decision makers become folks who are in their 20s, 30s, late 30s, they're going to begin consuming content the way that, they'll continue consuming content the way they do.
Welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Werding. It's my pleasure to announce today's guest, Dominick Tullo from TNR Oil Company, also Stealth Mode, which we'll get into later. Dom, welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast. Thanks for coming on today, man.
Thomas, thank you so much for having me, man. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. We've got a lot of interesting things to cover today. So let's dive in and let's cover your background a little bit and tell the listeners who you are if they've never heard of you and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I operate TNR Oil Company, which is located in South Kearney, New Jersey, right on the outskirts of the Port of Newark. And we are an 85-year-old oil distributor. We distribute ExxonMobil products to commercial fleets. We operate a couple ExxonMobil truck stops. We operate an ExxonMobil distributorship and a lubricants and DEF business. I've been here since 2015 when I graduated college. I joined my dad, and happy to say we're a fourth generation business, and we have a really solid trajectory to continue that.
That's awesome, man. So it's in your DNA what you're doing. I think that's interesting. So a little background. My family did something very similar when I was growing up. So they had a fuel distribution company all over the Midwest, from Northwest Indiana going into Chicago, mostly construction site work, very small fuel stations, bus depots, anything you can really think of. Like they had FedEx contracts for a while locally before they switched to like LNG and things like that. So I have a lot of like background in the similar space, but they, in 2008, in the last economic crisis, unfortunately had like $2.5 million in receivables they couldn't collect on. And their 105-year-old business unfortunately closed. But
it's a shame.
It is. But it showed me, at a younger age, like the right way to run a company, things you have to do, the way you have to think about the economic markets. And like my grandfather at the time just took a lot of risk when he probably shouldn't have. He always bet on himself, always took on an assumed risk and figured it would work out in his favor. Unfortunately, it didn't. So, I hats off to you guys, because like I really like, I feel what you guys do in my blood. Like I know that. It wasn't until I started in freight brokerage that I really realized how similarly they are connected. So I thought that was really cool. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because I just think it's so fascinating what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate it. It is all interconnected. And I think I'm just lucky that I'm a macroeconomic nerd, in that, especially when it comes time to operate a fueling business, because we get to see things that are happening early in the greater economy, perhaps before the greater consumer gets to see it. So like, for example, where I'm located in South Kearney, we primarily service drayage fleets that are pulling imports from China and then distributing it all over the United States. And we saw pretty intense declines starting about a year ago in our client volumes. And that was something that we just pay attention to. We have really good, on a relative basis, we have really good reporting compared to a lot of our competitors. So very obvious to see volumes were going down about a year ago. And we had about 4 or 5 years of 25 to 40% year over year growth leading into 2021. And we did that with upselling our clients on other products, hiring a really effective sales rep, like better technology, getting more aggressive on pricing. So having that growth year over year leading into 2021, and then kind of seeing what happened in 2020 and seeing that our best year in customer in company history was in 2020, wow, frankly, like really freaked me out because it just didn't make sense. The world was stopped, right. Everybody's working from home and the government's handing money out, but we had the best year we'd ever had. And frankly, we didn't expect it, but I'm an economic nerd and I just was paying attention to that. So in 2022, started to kind of pay attention to everything. We just had all this growth, kind of let the dust settle, check our limbs. Is everything still here? All right, everything's good. And that's kind of where we're at now in the business, where we kind of have a good understanding of what happened. Freight's been in a freight recession for quite a while now, probably 4 quarters, and we're just ready again to go risk on soon with growth.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the right, approach, right? You have to look at a lot of those micro and macroeconomic factors and really understand what's happening, because if you don't, you can end up in a lot of situations where you think you're doing a lot better than you are, and you're like, wow, like actually this year or this quarter we took a real beating, or we're down year over year, whatever it may be, because of what factors. And it's, if you don't know why you're down, it's hard to correct or understand what you need to focus on for the future. So I think that's definitely very important. Let's dive into something that I see a lot of, like, maybe confusion on social media and online, is how fuel pricing works. How does fuel pricing work, and how, and like, especially on the diesel and kind of lubricant side for like DEF and stuff like that, how does that work?
Yeah, so on our level, our prices change nightly at 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and we get a price change sent to us effective for midnight. That price comes in at 7 p.m. And between 7 p.m. and midnight, we'll inform our clients, whether they be gas stations or fleets, what their price will be for the next 24 hours. So that's pretty quick. So they see a lot of elasticity when you're buying directly from a wholesale of how fast a commercial price can change. On the gas station side, Thomas, right, if you operate a gas station and we sell you a load of fuel yesterday, the prices actually came down 8 cents on gasoline overnight last night. Thomas, if I delivered to you yesterday before 7 p.m. or before midnight, you're probably not going to run out to the street and drop your price 7 cents. You're probably going to make a little bit extra margin on the retail side as the gas station retail operator. And then those prices will trickle down slower because of that. Now, on the flip side, if I had to sell you a load today and your price went up 10 cents, then you're definitely going to go out and raise your price 10 cents because you don't want to lose money. So it's very elastic on the retail side on the way up, but inelastic on the way down. Or on the retail side. On the commercial side, it's fast both ways.
Yes, and you're not necessarily, you personally, when you're selling to your customers, you're not necessarily holding any fuel. Your trucks may be going to pick them up wholesale at the refineries or wherever you guys have your contracts, post 7 p.m., post those price changes so that you guys are ready for the morning, or even, some guys maybe leaving 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to go fuel, and then or get in line and then go fuel or get fuel and then go out and distribute it.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't affect you guys. Yeah, it doesn't affect you.
We have no inventory
unless yeah. So and it's just, and you guys do have like your actual truck stops, so that like that inventory is just basically all you have in actual inventory, but you're selling that inventory anyway. So it's more the retail side instead of the wholesale side. So you're not holding any inventory, and it doesn't really impact you on the wholesale side at all.
No, it does not impact us at all on the wholesale side. Our trucks are emptied out multiple times a day, so we don't have any inventory, and our price is moving constantly because of that. That said, where it does affect our business is on the account receivable side. So if the cost of goods sold or oil goes up, and let's say it's $3 a gallon versus $2 a gallon, my receivables will be considerably higher at $3 a gallon than they are at $2 a gallon. And I'm not necessarily making any more money. So we actually prefer a lower cost of goods sold because we can take more credit risk.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's dive into something I think is really interesting right now. Is that's truck stops and truck parking, right? I've got a truck parking club hat on right now. I know you guys do some truck parking at your locations. Truck parking is one of those really important things. And how are you guys at TNR trying to help solve that as well?
Sure. I mean, where we are is extremely densely populated. The Port of Newark is the epicenter of the Northeast in terms of importation and container work. And a lot of the folks that do work around us, our truck stop, for example, 80% of our volume is independent owner operators. So they live locally and they park their trucks. They can't park in front of their house. There's no space in New Jersey. I know you see that in other markets, but they don't have that luxury in New Jersey. So these folks are spending between $500 to $800 to park their power units, not even including a trailer at some points. They could pay that amount, depending on the market. That's closer to probably $300 now, but when the container business gets really busy, that'll get expensive. That fluctuates really quickly because these guys pay on a month-to-month basis, so they're not locking that in. Now, us in particular, we have 2 truck stops that we operate in South Kearney, and between the 2 of them, we've probably got about 80 truck parking spots where you can actually rent your spot by the hour. We do it in 12-hour blocks. It's always busy. I don't really think we have any vacancy ever. We do have people who call ahead and ask to call ahead to rent spots. Unfortunately, we can't do it. It's on a first come, first serve basis just because of how busy we are in this market. And then additionally, we have space that we do what's called master leasing. So we'll lease out bulk acreage to a larger freight operator, like a Hub Group or a US Express or XPO Logistics. These larger companies in our market, not so much US Express, but like XPO or Hub Group, they have container divisions. So they'll actually rent space off of us, and then they'll sublease out to the owner operators who pull their freight out of the port. So that part of us hey, you pull for us, here's your spot. You could argue maybe they get some premier access to the freight. Maybe they also hold that over you saying, hey, you rent spots from us, you need to pull our freight. I'm not sure how that all works. But that's primarily how we do our truck parking. We're not necessarily in the short-term truck parking, except for our truck stops. 80% of what we lease is long-term.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. No, that makes a lot of sense. And then so basically you've got 80 spots that you guys rent on the short term, and the rest is all the long-term stuff, like the XPOs and stuff like that that's renting. No, that's interesting because it makes it easy for for people to know, owner ops to know that, hey, they're going to have a spot when they're coming out of the port or going into the port. If they're hauling for XPO or Hub Group or whoever has these leases, they know hey, at least I know I'm going to have a spot. So it does help some of those smaller owner operators who do pull for some of those bigger groups. Now, something I want to touch on, I think we should dive into this because I think it's really interesting and really exciting. You recently told me about stealth mode. I think it's really interesting. So why don't we tell the listeners what stealth mode is, and then we'll dive into why you launched it.
Sure. Stealth Mode Media is a freight adjacent Twitter agency. And it's designed to help companies modernize the information that they get out to carriers, brokers, truck drivers, but with the mindset of just building a community around your content. And the premise around it really is that the decision makers in the freight world are changing, but they're changing at a 10 to 15-year lag compared to a lot of other tech businesses that we've seen, because it's not a tech business. It's very much an older generation business. That said, as those decision makers become folks who are in their 20s, 30s, late 30s, they're going to begin consuming content they'll continue consuming content the way they do. And the way they consume content is on social media. You see lately a big run up in real estate Twitter, small business Twitter, crypto Twitter,
Yep.
freight Twitter, freight X is going to be right there with it. And the way we look at it at Stealth Mode is getting involved in that sphere is basically an in the money call option for 5 to 10 years out that you've placed your stake. And as more people become brokers, carrier operators, owner operators, truck drivers, they will continue consuming content the way they know. And that's through their cell phone. So we're starting off with Twitter because it's something that we're pretty good at. But it will probably evolve into different social media channels. But the idea really is to help freight adjacent businesses modernize their outreach.
It's extremely interesting because what we've seen and what you just said. So like people of our age, people our generation and younger are starting to really come into the freight and logistics space. And we have been for a long time, especially over the last 4 or 5 years. And like you said, we're going to continue to consume the type of media we want to consume and how we want to consume it. We're not gonna change our habits to like what our parents do and what our older generations do. We've always pushed back against those like the norms and in society basically. Like we've created our own like lane in terms of how we want things done and how we're gonna like go about them. And it's interesting to see, like especially in freight, like freight is always 10 years behind, 15 years behind. But it's interesting to see, even with how big over the last year, like FreightX has become and like all these other channels have become, the companies still don't want to adapt to these models. Why do you think that is?
I think they're nervous. I think they're afraid to like
Yeah.
get on there and like make memes and have a good time. Like I think they'll be made fun of and they're just out of touch with it. But I think that's a very small percentage. I think a greater percentage
Mm.
is just frankly not really aware of it. And I think you're going to start to see a
Mm.
pretty quick exponential transition for a few reasons. One, the Please Advise community with what Reed is doing, and Reed's a co-founder of
Yeah.
Stealth Mode Media. What's happened there has definitely begun to push it forward. In addition,
Yeah.
the Please Advisory group was at F3 this year, and Craig Fuller with FreightWaves has really also invested in getting involved in that community as well, and is definitely adding some tailwind
Yeah.
because he has a lot of influence. A lot of people listen to what he says. So he's also recently gotten really active. He's always been active on Twitter, but more active on Twitter in regards to freight memes.
Even
So that's
more.
obviously going to push some tailwind. And then I think on the external side, company owners generally sell when they have to, not when they want to. And why that matters
Mm.
is if you're in a multi generational business and now is the time where things are getting really tight, you probably should have gotten out in 2021 when things were good. But you're going to get to a point where a lot of 60-year-old or 50-year-old or 70-year-old multi generational businesses are just going to begin to throw the towel in at this point.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you will have kind of a change in hands of who's making decisions at freight companies, logistics, brokers, and those folks are going to be young-minded, more modern, and they're going to want to invest in the type of social that they're most engaged with.
I fully agree, and I think that it's very very interesting that like what you guys are doing and trying to push that, because it's something that really does need a modernization approach. Like it can't, like you said, like if you're not getting with it, a lot of these companies are just going to cease to exist in the future. They're not going to. It's kind of like, you look at companies who didn't adapt to change. Companies like Sears, J.C. Penney, all these companies like Sears is, they had their huge catalog. They were like one of the first like basically e-commerce companies. They were sending out their catalogs and getting people to buy everything, and you could buy a damn house from Sears. But now they really cease to exist in any market because they just didn't adapt to, um, the internet and modernizing. So I think that it really comes down to just modernizing and coming at it with a more um, fun approach and not worrying so much about like being made fun of and just go out there and have fun. I think that's kind of, part of it. A lot of companies that do a lot of good things on social media, like Truck Stop, Freight Vana. There's a lot of really interesting companies that do fun things with memes, and they're always having fun. Who are some of the like top companies that you see online they're doing some of this fun stuff?
Truck Stop is really good at what they do. And I had the pleasure of like watching Truck Stop kind of third party at the F3 event. And they are very much like that through and through. Kendra, the CEO, had a really good keynote with Craig Fuller. Additionally, there was rapid fire pitches where they were pitching their products. And some new companies did a great job, but sometimes older companies can be kind of stale and like not that exciting when they're pitching their products. Truck Stop's rapid fire was really good. Their party at F3 was really good. Their social is really good. So when you have that kind of continuity, people start to pick up on it, but they are absolutely amazing. And whoever runs their account is doing a tremendous job. Frankly, there's not many others yet that are really poking out. You will start to see some. Frankly, we are managing a handful of accounts now, so you'll start to see more of that pick up. But to your point, there's not many. I'm looking forward to seeing some more older businesses get involved and just kind of see how they come at it. But I also think you're just going to have new businesses adopt this way where not every post needs to be a call to action. You go to a lot of Twitter accounts from businesses who are already existed, and they use their social medias as just a constant way to basically solicit business. Every single post is happening once a quarter. They're not posting with cadence. They post infrequently, and there's a call to action. And people don't like being sold to. People like to laugh, have a good time, build community, engage. So we need to look at it from a different approach. And when you can have an older business or a new business just begin to curate a community, there are tailwinds. Will you be able to quantify those tailwinds really quickly and say, oh, we hired stealth mode and we're doing XY sales in 3 months? No. If that's what you're looking for, we're not the right person for you, because we're not going to stuff a call to action down your community's throat. The idea is to cultivate a community of people who want to learn more about your product, people who already use your product, people who like to see, for example, like the Slim Jim Twitter account. I'm not sure if you've seen that. They post stuff that's outrageous. It's funny. You don't expect it. Oh, I'll follow that. And then you're just along for the ride. So building a community and cultivating a community around your brand is going to be the way that companies need to go to market. And then one more thing, like you go, Werner Enterprises, one of the largest fleets in the country. They have 7 Twitter followers. 7, bro. That's ridiculous. Like that's not ridiculous. Yeah. And look, that's kind of funny. Like good for them for like, being so large, it doesn't even matter. But that's not what the future looks like.
No, that's a company that, in 15, 20 years may cease to exist because they're not going to be able to recruit at the same levels because they're not going to have that social media presence. They're not going to have, they may have some of the rollover of, like they've used us or we've used them forever, but there's going to be a shift in who people are using based on some of these call to actions. There aren't call to actions. Like I talked to Ben a couple days ago, or he was on the podcast a couple weeks ago, but it released on Wednesday. And it's just like we were talking about his content and how he has really like just had fun with what he wants to do. And he's seen like an influx of carriers coming to want to work with Cowan and some shippers that want to come work with them because of just, the authenticity that he shows online. So it kind of goes to show like the big culture shift of FreightX and social media as a whole is really going to take a hold of freight very quickly. It already has. And I think we're going to see that shift a lot sooner than, people are expecting, we're expecting. I think in the next year or 2 years, like most companies that are going to be relevant in freight are going to need to be posting.
The growth will definitely be exponential. And additionally, companies in 5 or 10 years will begin looking to have employees like Ben,
Yeah.
because they're going to want folks that have a following. And if you have a personal brand like he does, then it'll benefit everybody. It'll benefit you, the employee, but it also benefits the company you work for because you're basically
Definitely.
a walking billboard and you make excitable content and you get engagement. Everybody is winning from that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was talking with Charlie Safro from CS Recruiting, and she basically said the same thing. Where if companies don't start to make those shifts, and a lot of them are just scared to have employees say the wrong thing or things come out incorrectly or whatever it may be. But her idea is you just have to train people the correct way of how to actually post on social media and make sure you're not making basically an ass of yourself in the process. And I think that that's pretty easy to teach. I don't think that like it needs to be some really hard thing. It's just most people know, and especially in our age, know how to meme. They know how to use social media. So it's just what not to do, what kind of like ins and outs for each individual company.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up with cancel culture. Like the last
Yeah,
10 years,
100%.
like I'm 30 years old, so like that's been something that I've
31.
been exposed to for like a lot of my adult life. And yeah, I
Yeah.
find that um, it's pretty easy to avoid that, especially on Twitter. Like people don't seem to take Twitter so seriously. Now that said,
Yeah.
you want to be careful about what you say. You want to be intentional about what you say. You want to make sure you're not offending people. Um, but frankly, if you're on Twitter and you're posting content, and maybe the 60-year-old crowd would not necessarily like the memes, well, frankly, they're not going to see it anyway. So it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily matter because that's not the audience that you're going to for that. Um, Now, at stealth mode, we make sure that we match kind of the vibe that each client wants to put off. Um, we manage some accounts that like really like to push the envelope and they want to meme really hard and they want to be like
Yeah.
really sarcastic and funny. We can do that. We're built out to do that. We also have some media brands that don't want to do that. They just want us to
Mm.
really go with their content and just throw a meme in here and there. We've got some companies that have private equity rounds, like they need to be careful about what they say. So
What they
we'll
say.
really
Yeah.
focus on like keeping it down the middle. Um, but what makes stealth mode media just so unique is that all of us are on Twitter all day anyway. So if I'm on my personal account and I see something that one of our clients' accounts should engage with, we'll throw that into our distribution channel, and some one of our employees will jump on that and they will
Mm.
make a post that interacts. So it's not all outgoing content. Sometimes it's just being a reply guy and just getting the right reply or a quote tweet that gets really good engagement. And when you do that, you get to build a
Yeah.
really interesting style, right? Again, it's not all about call to action. So when you can just reply to a conversation and contribute on behalf of a company, it's really impactful.
I completely agree with you. I think that the benefits and the impacts are really starting to be shown. I think that, I think Reed really brought out like that side of freight. Like I think that he really memed his way into like starting something very interesting. And I want to shift into the F3 meme contest for next year and kind of what happened, because I know I wasn't at F3 this year, unfortunately, but the JOC kind of came out of nowhere. And, I've had a few interactions with the JOC. I'm gonna put this on the record first. I've been told like one JOC editor messaged me and was basically like, if you continue to push Freight Waves articles on your timeline, I'll disconnect with you. And I said, great, disconnect with me, because I'm sorry that they're the fastest media company in freight. And if you don't like that, like that's kind of tough shit, right? Like, but like they called out freight memes. They don't think it's professional. They don't think the culture is right. But obviously there's a shift. Like we've been talking about this whole time. There's a shift in the culture. It's not these 60-year-old men shuffling papers anymore. It's our generation coming in and really taking over. So what do you think? What do you think is going to come of this F3 meme contest, and how do you think it's going to grow and impact freight over the next few years?
I'll just start by saying the F3 temper, like the JOC temper tantrum in regards to freight memes is exactly the problem that they have. And that's why, as a journal, they frankly just won't continue to get really the engagement they could. And I don't think there's any way of fixing that. I believe that they're in part owned by the S&P. So they really don't have the jurisdiction to go out and have fun. They are a very serious organization. And frankly, culturally, it just seems like from the outside, culturally, they're broken. And that's a shame, but that's just the way it is. The F3 meme really, I have to give a lot of credit to both Reed and Craig Fuller, because Craig is forward thinking clearly enough to understand the change in what's happening. And instead of like fading it the way the JOC is fading it, Craig is embracing it and really bringing his arms around it and pushing it from behind rather than standing in front of it and not viewing it as a threat. And you really have to look at a founder like Craig and just give him a lot of credit for that, because it's very tempting to do what the JOC is doing. But Craig's not doing that. He's doing quite the contrary, and instead pushing it from behind. F3, I was not at last year's F3. I was at this one. And from what I understand, this year's F3 had a different energy around it. There are folks there that would not otherwise have been there because of what it was like. Basically, what I'm saying is you had truck drivers there. You had some younger content creators there that are, whether they're brokers or whether they just work in the space, that are more content mindset. And it just had a whole different energy about it. And that's where like the F3 memes came from. And then as soon as it was over, Craig got active on Twitter and just started saying, we're going to do a meme contest. Anybody who makes memes for the next 365 days and mentions F3 meme is going to get a free invitation. Just think how smart that is, right? Because now you have all these people using that hashtag. That hashtag exists. I mean, Craig knows what he's doing.
He does. You know, I had the pleasure of working for him for a couple of years at Freight Waves on the Sonar side, and he just like, he's exactly what he preaches. He literally, like, he's not just this way, like on the outside, like it's not just for the marketing side, right? Like he practices what he preaches. He wants his people to like be free and be able to talk about what they want to and what they have passions about, and doesn't hold them back. And I think that a lot of like founders and creators in this kind of space kind of don't want that. They want their employees to just kind of be their employees and not have this this following, because they think it can be detrimental to their brand of, oh, what if we lose this employee? But in the interim or in the long term, if that employee wants to leave, they're going to leave regardless if they have a following or not. So, but yeah, Craig's amazing at what he does, and I think that what he's doing with this F3 meme contest and really uplifting other freight creators is really awesome, because you don't see that anywhere else in the space. They are the only real media company that's like, hey, like let's embrace this new side of media, these new outlets that are popping up that want to help cover freight.
And it shows, right? In his organization, you have really good creators who have really amazing personal Twitter accounts. And it really just adds tailwinds to Freight Waves. I mean, I've always been familiar with Freight Waves. I heard Craig Fuller on a podcast a few years ago and was just mega impressed. Just how he spoke about nearshoring and all these things that were happening. So I've always kept my finger on the pulse of Freight Waves, but recently got more engaged with it because I'm friends with the people who work there, because I've met them through Twitter. And that's also just really effective. But it all ties back to how important it is to have a community around your brand.
100%. And let's wrap up on this. I think that we've talked a lot about building communities. What are like 3 ways that newer, like there's a lot of newer freight tech founders that are coming up into the space. We see them all the time, like in the Discord, on Twitter. They're always popping up, new people. They're trying to build new things. If they're trying to build a community around what they're doing, what are the top 3 things you would give them advice to do starting off?
I would say definitely build in public. Definitely tell people what you're working on and ask for feedback on it, and just engage with people who are like interested in knowing what you're actually building. You can do a few things there. It could help make sure you have product market fit in real time by just basically telling people what you're building, and people will give you feedback. So I would say build in public is really, really important, which kind of leads into number 2. If you're going to build in public, you need to be really active on social. And I don't mean posting once a week. Like, you need to post every single day. And if you don't want to, then hire somebody to do it, because it's that important, especially in an environment where, frankly, a lot of freight tech businesses build the same thing with slight variation. So one way to really differentiate yourself from the crowd is to have a community. When you have a community, you get to know your customers get to know you, and your customers will become your greatest advocates, because no matter what year it is, there is no better marketing than word of mouth. So step 2 is really being active on that community. And then 3, I would say just like build stuff, just actually ship products out with haste, and people will come along, especially if you're showing it to a greater community.
Yeah, I think that those are really three important, like three very important pieces of advice, because I think building in public is one of those things that people are afraid to do. They're afraid of the criticism. They're afraid of what if people shit on my product. But that's going to come with releasing a product no matter what. And you might as well get that, like you said, that instant feedback of knowing, like, oh, this doesn't work, or this isn't going to work right. Like, how can I adjust in real time? And you have to be able to make those adjustments no matter what. I think that if that's the things that are like holding you back from posting on social media, it might not even be like, maybe it's something you need to rethink to begin with, because obviously a lot of founders and companies grow just fine without social media. But like we said, the culture is changing, and growing in public and building a company in public is just I think it's a really good way. We've seen a lot of companies starting to do this over the last year, and it's been very fascinating to watch. Fascinating to watch the shifts happen. Fascinating to like be able to give feedback in real time, right? Like if you have a personal attachment to that brand and you can give them feedback right away, that's amazing.
Yeah, it'll also maybe in the future give you access to different employees who are in your community, people who know how to code, people who are interested in freight and know how to program, could be great future employees of you. So there's a lot more to just growing your business. You can grow an ability to recruit employees. But yeah, the tailwinds are incredible, especially in a time where technology is so democratized. It doesn't take much to get in and build software. So it's important to differentiate in your outreach if you can't differentiate as much as you'd like to in your service offering.
Yeah, I think that that's very important, because like you said, you've got to be able to differentiate yourself in some way, especially with so many different companies that are doing very similar things in the spaces. So I think it's very important to just help differentiate yourself in some way. Dom, I really cannot, express I appreciate your time today. Where can people find you online if they want to find what you're doing, what companies we talked about, Stealth Mode, TNR, and some of your personal social medias?
Sure. Everything is on Twitter. My personal social media is Dominick_Tullo. Our TNR Oil account is TR Oil Co. on Twitter. And then Stealth Mode Media is Stealth Mode Med on Twitter as well. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man. We'll have all of your links down in the show notes for anyone watching. If you're watching on YouTube, it will be in the description. Make sure you guys do like and review. Helps us out a ton. And we do drop newsletters on Monday and Wednesday, thinkfreight.io. And we'll catch you guys next week. Thanks, Dom.